Hello, everyone. I'm Larry Jameson, the Dean of the Perelman School of Medicine, and I'm delighted to be here as part of our new series on our leaders at Penn Medicine. We're fortunate to have a very talented group of leaders who are focused on creativity and innovation, on the culture of our organization, and they're doing a great job of building out our mastery and expertise in particular fields. And today we're going to focus on neuroscience. So I'm really pleased to have with me today two chairs of our neuroscience departments. We've got Dr. Francis Jensen, the chair of neurology, and Dr. Dan Yoshor, the chair of neurosurgery. And they also represent someone who's been with us for a few years, Dr. Jensen, and a new member of our leadership team, Dr. Yoshor. So I'd like to start just by asking them to make a few comments about their backgrounds and their departments, and then we'll move on to some other exciting topics. So, Francis, let me start with you. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to Penn Medicine, and about the exciting Department of Neurology.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. I came to Penn Medicine after about almost 30 years at Harvard, building up a career in translational neuroscience as a physician scientist. And I was running a translational neuroscience program, and it was actually the ideal time for me to come to a place like Penn to actually chair an entire department of neurology. And what attracted me about Penn was the fact that this is a department inside a school, inside a university, inside an incredibly vibrant city with a huge healthcare network, that this was the time, especially for neuroscience, which has been rapidly evolving. So it sort of checked all the boxes. We're now ready to engage in some really exciting interdisciplinary work, which, again, having Dan join the faculty at this time as a leader, along with our other neuroscience leaders, both clinical and basic, this is going to be an incredible decade ahead.
Well, that's exciting, and I'll dive into some of those topics later. So Dan, neurology and neurosurgery are very closely aligned. Both fields focus on the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Tell us a little bit about how you came to Penn Medicine, your background, and your Department of Neurosurgery.
Thank you, Larry. My name is Daniel Yoshor, and I'm delighted to be here at Penn Medicine. And as you said, I am new here, but very excited to be here. I spent the last 20 years on the faculty at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas, and I really never expected to leave. I was really enjoying my time there, and I think I made a lot of important contributions, did a lot of good work in a good group. But when the opportunity arose at Penn, and when I took a visit at Penn, I was just dazzled. And coming back on the plane, I said to myself, there is no place on earth better positioned for what's next in neuroscience than Penn Medicine. It's really an extraordinary convergence of resources and an extraordinary convergence of purpose where everything's aligned just right. And I think this is the best place on earth for what's coming, the exciting things that are coming ahead. So I'm very excited to be here, and that's why I came. And in addition to that, the wonderful colleagues here like Dr. Jensen, who has been fantastic in greeting me so warmly and integrating me, myself and my department into the greater neuroscience community at Penn. It's been a great ride so far.
From my perspective, fields advance at different times in our history. And Francis, you're the chair of the oldest department of neurology, but I think arguably the pace of advances have changed. It's really fast in neuroscience now. We've got fantastic imaging capability for the brain in particular. Neurogenetics is maybe one of the most rapidly expanding fields in genetics. And in neurosurgery, the kind of devices and instrumentation we have to work with have been transformative. So I'd like to have each of you just make some comments about the field of neuroscience and how it's positioned now to help us think differently about the classification of diseases and some of the treatments available. So Francis, maybe just starting with you, I know you've been a proponent of this topic at a national level.
Yes, I think our time has come, finally, for neuroscience, the clinical neurosciences. And we've come to a point now that this is all converging, and we're able to really now implement discovery. And we've had tremendous advances. We can reverse strokes in many cases within 24 hours. We can use infusion therapy for immune disorders to suppress inflammation in diseases like multiple sclerosis and others. We can use devices to regulate seizures and Parkinson's disease implanted in the brain by Dr. Yoshor's department and his colleagues. And then, like you said, gene therapy is sort of the newest incredible advance in that we are actually now, because of science, identifying some of the most hereditable disorders of the body are in the brain and nervous system. And hence, it's ideally poised for advancing therapies that are directed at changing our gene expression. And we are seeing it for paralysis, for blindness. We're moving into diseases like Lou Gehrig's and Parkinson's and other degenerative disorders, as well as some of the early life disorders, the neurodevelopmental disorders that include autism and some of these devastating conditions that are genetic in nature. So it's just amazing what's happening right now. I feel we're at the crux of, we're just at the beginning of this explosion. I think at Penn, we are powered to do this. We're powered not just for the discovery science that is coming out of our laboratories and with our even industry collaborations that are necessary to actually build these into clinic, but also we have the clinical platforms that are supported by the Penn Medicine environment and the network that allows us to get cutting edge care out to our patient populations. And from that, we can do population research and come back in with new hypotheses to feed the labs. So I see this cycle as happening here. It's just extraordinary. It's, as Dan was saying, it's everything I ever imagined that my career could actually, I could ever witness in my career. It's happening right now in neuroscience.
Well, Frances, that is very exciting, and I appreciate you mentioning some of those disorders. I think almost every family has members afflicted with one or another of those neuroscience disorders. Dan, it takes really deep expertise to manage the kinds of diseases that Dr. Jensen is talking about, whether it's stroke or Parkinson's disease. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what you see exciting in the field of neurosurgery.
Neurosurgery, justifiably, has always been known as a field that emphasizes technical mastery. I mean, that's what neurosurgery is about using microsurgical skills to produce great results for patients. What's exciting now is that emphasis of technical mastery is being married to innovative technology. And that's what's so important about being in an environment like Penn, because this is a place where innovation lives. We're now able to treat so many conditions that used to require large, invasive openings, large openings in the skull or spine. We're now able to treat them using technology through tiny openings, sometimes openings the size of a needle stick. It still requires a lot of surgical skill and a lot of surgical judgment, but the technology lets us do things in so much more efficiently and so much more seamlessly, and I think that's tremendously exciting. The other area I see in neurosurgery also relates to technology, in that historically what neurosurgeons did is they would operate skillfully to take a pathology out of the brain. We would take a brain tumor out of the brain, taking only the tumor out and leaving the brain in good working order, of course. Or we'd exclude a ruptured aneurysm that was bleeding in the brain from causing further hemorrhage and further damage. Now, with the advances in neuroscience, some of which Frances already alluded to, we're actually kind of operating on the brain. We're learning to develop technologies that stimulate the brain and record from the brain and actually tap into the circuits in the brain to restore function to patients and to make their lives better. And that's very exciting. We used to sort of operate just trying to do minimal damage to the brain, sneak in and out, but not really operate on the neural interface itself. And the new field that's emerging is this field of brain-computer interfaces, where we're, so to speak, really operating in the brain, trying to work our technology to marry our technology to the natural working structures of the brain. And that's what's going to happen in the next decades. And we're going to see just extraordinary advances in neuroengineering and technology applied to our patients. And I think Penn, again, because of its multidisciplinary strengths, its deep research emphasis, and there's a certain boldness about pursuing innovation here that I think is really special. There's a reason why new things tend to happen in medicine here on our campus and in our hospitals. And there's no question that neuroscience will be a central force in that ethos and in that direction in the coming years.
You've had a chance to tour the new hospital, the new pavilion. You've been into the operating rooms. I know you're helping design how imaging can be used during surgery. Maybe you can just comment on how this new facility will facilitate what you do.
Well, the new facility, I can actually see it out my window right there. It's a bit tantalizing because we're not quite ready to move in there, a few months away, but it's going to be fabulous. It is a hospital that is built from the ground up to introduce technology and research and innovation to our patients in a way that really doesn't exist anywhere else in the country. And we have research facilities that are directly married into our clinical facilities. It's a hospital that's going to treat tomorrow's patients, to develop the new treatments for tomorrow's patients. And you can see it when you walk down the halls. It's built into the physical structure of the hospital in a unique way.
So I'd like to take a few minutes and dive into your personal lives a bit more. Francis, I know while you've got professional expertise in epilepsy and the cell biology of epilepsy, you also decided to write a popular book on the teenage brain, inspired in part because of your own experiences as a mother and working with a lot of teenagers who were friends. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your book, The Teenage Brain.
Yeah, thanks. That is a little bit of how I spend my time out of work. So there is so much going on in neurosciences that I, of course, see everything through the prism of neuroscience practically in my life. And I was, raising two teenage sons and just marveling at the metamorphosis that was happening, and recognized that there I was as a neuroscientist, also seeing patients and knowing the biology, but also a parent. So I learned that there was a lot of science, Larry, that was sort of still in the ivory towers of our research, libraries and journals that the public don't have any access to. So I went around, started talking to schools and then to science museums, and then eventually got, coerced into writing a book to sort of bring the neuroscience of the new neuroscience of the healthy adolescent brain and also of the not so healthy adolescent brain to make it more understandable to people. And I have learned so much from this experience. I never expected the groundswell of response to actually just making neuroscience available to the average person so they can use it. And we talk a lot about, why do they have issues with risk taking? Why is their learning so much better than it will be later in life? They have these unique strengths and vulnerabilities.
Well, I know there are many dimensions to your life, and that's been an important one. You're a terrific communicator, and it's a complex topic to share. You mentioned museums, and I know you serve on the Franklin Institute, and you may not know that Dan Yoshor is a student of Benjamin Franklin, our founder and an inventor, a creator. So, Dan, maybe you can comment on why you think Ben Franklin from a couple of centuries ago is still relevant, not only the history, but the current day at Penn Medicine.
When I came to Penn, of course, you always think of Ben Franklin, co-founder of the University of Pennsylvania, and of course, Pennsylvania Hospital, the nation's first hospital. So as Larry mentioned, I did a little bit of digging into the local history. And what I found that really struck with me as I began to explore what I want the culture of the the department that I'm privileged to lead, what I want that culture to be. I think we have a great example of what we want at Penn in our founder, in Benjamin Franklin. That is, Franklin was a fearless scientist and a scientist of great renown, really, and great accomplishment. But he was also a scientist who was a practical person, a tinkerer, an inventor who didn't just redefine the world's understanding of electricity, but also invented the lightning rod, which was a major advance at the time. Lightning killed many thousands of people across the world and was something that people had great fear of. And Franklin took his scientific understanding and applied it to making something that really helped people. And I think that is the ethos that we have at the Perelman School of Medicine, where we are deep thinking scientists. There's no lack of scholarship here. This is a very, very serious scientific and research institution. But there's also a passion here for taking the science out of the laboratory and having it impact patients quickly and meaningfully. And I think it's a big part of our DNA here at Penn. We're scientists who apply what we learn to the betterment of mankind, and that's a really terrific thing.
I know one of your scientific interests is to try to better understand how neural impulses that we get from, say, vision and light is converted into an image that the brain will interpret.
You know, it's very well known that the image that's reflected onto the retina is very different from what we perceive in our daily lives. Our brains do a tremendous amount of work in interpreting the outside world and changing what is actually a veridical image directed onto the retina into a useful percept that we use in our daily lives effortlessly and instantly. So I am driven to understand how brain activity underlies and encodes visual information. On the practical side, we know, of course, that there are unfortunately many patients who have irreversible blindness because their eyes or their optic nerves have been damaged through disease or trauma or what have you. And what's tantalizing in those patients is that the visual part of the brain is still fully functional. In fact, when a blind patient is studied in a functional magnetic resonance imaging unit, where we study how the brain is activated while a patient does a task, if a blind patient thinks of a visual image, the visual part of the brain is active. So we know that you can actually tap into the circuits of the brain, even in someone who's been blind for many years, and make them see spots of light. You can stimulate the brain and make them see spots of light. And my laboratory is focused on two things: on understanding how the brain encodes visual information, a very basic scientific question, and then, in the style of Benjamin Franklin, trying to make a practical invention out of that. And in this case, the practical invention is developing a brain-computer interface that can take pictures of images from the outside world, bypass the broken eyes in a blind patient, and put that information directly into the patient's fully functioning visual brain, and thereby restore visual perception to patients who otherwise have no other option.
As each of you know, one of our areas of emphasis at Penn Medicine has been on inclusion and diversity and also eliminating healthcare disparities.
Yes, we have actually, we're a very diverse department, as it turns out. But what's been really wonderful to see is in the last several years, under the direction of my vice chair for diversity, Roy Hamilton, he has created these different task forces amongst the department, some that are community facing, some that are talking about trainees, some about patients and the healthcare disparities, and also career development based on, different factors of how do we improve diversity and inclusion across all of those in our culture. And it's not just the faculty and trainees, it's also the staff that work in our practices. It's across the boards. So I think we're very well positioned, and most departments are now approaching this in a similar way with vice chairs of diversity for across our entire set of departments. One of the things about the neurosciences, though, that this has historically been an area where there's a significant amount of public health disparity in disorders like stroke, epilepsy, and dementia, and that patients variably get to medical attention. A lot of these are chronic disorders that require frequent touches with healthcare, and I'm very proud to say that we are working on a number of different ways, including accessing the Leonard Davis Institute, the epidemiology, healthcare, groups that are, and Wharton, all thinking about how do we improve our distribution of healthcare, especially for the neuroscience disorders, which can be more difficult to be diagnosed by, say, a primary care physician. So I think we're very well suited to move forward in this next decade to really work using our own system as our vehicle to deliver better care in a more inclusive way to a more diverse population.
And in the surgical specialties, Dan, I know that diversity has been slower, but it's happening now. And maybe you can provide some perspective in neurosurgery, both among your faculty and trainees, but also some of the healthcare disparities.
Sure. I've been very impressed here at Penn with the commitment to diversity. And neurosurgery traditionally has not been very diverse, particularly with regards to recruiting women. And what's exciting is that has really changed a lot over the last just several years, and I'm very proud that the department that I am, proud to lead has one of the most diverse corps of resident physicians. We have outstanding diversity in our resident complement, and I wish I could take the credit for it, but it goes to my predecessor, Sean Grady, who made a very careful and thoughtful effort to do this as a means to really grooming the next generation of diverse faculty neurosurgeons and practicing neurosurgeons. And so we're going to build on that work and really enhance the diversity of our faculty. And that's a major focus as we look to add outstanding faculty to Penn Neurosurgery. And this is a great environment to do it. And the other thing on diversity, I think Francis mentioned this, is there's a really strong commitment here to involvement in the community in terms of healthcare and engagement. Even we were working on a program to engage with high school students in the local community to get them interested in neuroscience and neurosurgery. I think that kind of community involvement it's very real and it's very meaningful, and it's definitely happening here every day.
Well, I'm very grateful for the leadership of each of you in this area. I know we're not going to rest until we've closed some of these gaps, because we'll be a more creative and impactful institution, and our patients will receive more effective care. So as we start to wrap up, I'd like each of you to think forward and just very briefly describe one thing that you're very excited about in the field of neuroscience. So as you think maybe 2 or 3 years from now, what will we be doing that we're not doing at the present time? So Francis, in your area of neurology, give us an idea of what the future looks like.
Because we have these new tools, we're able to stage and identify diseases better than we ever have before. So we can we're moving in the direction of being able to identify people who might go on to have dementia before they are too far along, or people with Lou Gehrig's disease, for instance, and risks, and we can assess risk better to apply early treatments. So I think one of the most exciting things is this, we call it biomarker development, and being able to use it to sort of stage different parts of disease to which you might give different types of treatments depending upon where you are in that disease process. And Penn is actually one of the champions for biomarker development. Some of the low-hanging fruit that I think we're seeing with our signature strengths, as I always call them, that is very interdisciplinary and requires this interdisciplinary environment, include device development, neuromodulation. Dan's mentioned this many times, but it can be applied to many fields. And we're seeing it now in different areas of neurology and neurological disorders and neurosurgical disorders, but we're soon to be seeing this move into the field of psychiatry. Already transcranial magnetic stimulation is being used for depression, but we expect to see more of this network modulation happening. And with people in our engineering like Brian Litt and these big labs that we have that are collaborating with other parts of the university, I think that is neuroengineering is big. The other one, of course, is neurogenetics. We've mentioned it many times. Our ability to now diagnose and determine inherited mutation of a gene and then correct that is expanding just unbelievably with our many colleagues here in the department, in the School of Medicine and beyond. And I think also it's the delivery of those different gene therapies that require really, really special and sort of micro surgical techniques and interventional radiologists, really a team effort. I mean, we have a great team right now that it consists of neurologists, neurosurgeons, radiologists, neuroradiologists, psychologists, and geneticists, among others, that are really working on these patients. By being in this interdisciplinary environment that goes from children all the way up to the aging brain, I think we are, it's just an incredibly exciting time. Those are the big areas that I think we're going to see tangible change in the next 3 to 5 years. No question about it.
And Dan, what about in neurosurgery?
Well, I think Francis's answer actually relates a lot to what we're doing in neurosurgery, and I think it emphasizes the point that the lines are getting blurred, frankly, in a good way. We work very closely with neurology. I think the connection between neurology and neurosurgery has never been greater, both at Penn and hopefully at other forward-looking institutions. But it used to be that there were a set of neurosurgical diseases, more structural diseases, and there were neurological diseases where there wasn't a structural problem. But we actually really know now all these diseases have cellular and genetic bases, and there really is a continuum. So the idea that a neurosurgeon only studies aneurysms and stroke is no longer true. Neurology is very involved in that, and we're marrying our skill sets and our technologies and our scientific advances together in a very, useful, productive way. So the lines are blurred, and as Francis said, neurosurgeons are not just people who cut things out of the head anymore. We're people who embrace the latest technologies, work closely with our colleagues across many disciplines, and try to use interventions, surgical interventions. We have to embrace neuroscience and technology if we're going to really make big steps in these really challenging disorders. And we're going to work closely with people like Francis Jensen, and that's one of the reasons that I'm excited to be here.
I want to thank both of you for joining us today. You're amazing leaders. You've got professional expertise in your areas of research, in your clinical skills, but you've also got terrific leadership skills. You're inspirational leaders. You've recruited an amazing faculty who have deep expertise. For almost every disease you can think of in the nervous system, we have a faculty member who is an expert. And for trainees who want to join us at Penn Medicine, whether medical students or residents or fellows, what better environment to train and take care of neurological disorders in the future? And for scientists, we've got this incredible collaborative environment where in the beginning, people who were working on CAR T-cell for leukemia are now thinking about CAR T-cell for glioblastoma. And the engineering school, as you mentioned, Dan, is partnering with us in the device development side. So it's an exciting environment here at Penn Medicine. We're fortunate to have you.
Can I add one thing? We're also good friends, Francis and I. And I think that, if we're going to talk about it, I think that's an important context here. And there's a wonderful and very genuine partnership here. And I think that's a special part of what we have at Penn is we have a lot of really good people, and we cut through red tape and we get things done and work together. And that's really, I've only been here 6 months, but Dean Jameson, as our leader, you should be proud of that in particular. I think it really is a big part of what makes us special. And it's a big part of why I'm excited to be here.
Well said.
I would ditto, actually underscore that. And what's exciting is we're now recruiting people together and doing some blended recruits so that we can really build these teams up. So it's incredibly great timing that Dan arrived with all of his energy. It's extraordinary. And the fact that he is a world-class scientist and engineer, clinical engineer, actually, is something we're all very excited about. And we know it's going to help lead us forward.
I really appreciate your collaborative spirit and your inspiration.